Hello, and thanks for being with us here on the New Life Show, a series of talks with Dr. Michael Lightman. Hello, Dr. Lightman. Hello, everyone. Hello, Yala Shadavel. Hello. Today, we'd like to talk to Dr. Lightman about the phenomenon of loneliness. We'd like to understand where does it come from, how does it influence us, and how can we cope with it. Be with us, Yael, please. Yeah, more or less since the 1950s, we're talking about loneliness as a phenomenon that causes suffering. We're talking about a phenomenon that, even though that a person might be surrounded by many people, he feels very lonely. Researchers show that this is something that's common, especially among young people under the age of 25. And I heard from people that work with children that it's also something that children are starting to suffer from. They're children that start feeling lonely, even though that it's an age that they're supposed to be surrounded by friends, they go to school, then they have their social networks and so on. And still, there's a feeling of loneliness. And especially, people over the age of 65 feel it, but it actually relates to all ages. And there are even such approaches today that say that instead of saying, I feel lonely, what does a little child feel? I'm bored. What does that mean? That I'm alone, that I'm lonely. So, before I ask the question, I would like to define loneliness. So we're talking about a subjective feeling that's expressed in incorrect social relations or as a result of the lack of sufficient social relations. We're talking about an emotional state where a person feels that he doesn't belong. Usually people that feel lonely feel a great yearning to connect with other people. And another definition is the gap between a person's desire for a social relationship and the way things actually are. A person can feel lonely even if seemingly he or she are surrounded by people. And I'd like to open with the question, in your opinion, what causes a person to feel lonely? What is the cause of loneliness? First of all, I agree with you. This is your profession. You probably feel this phenomenon on many of your patients. So yes, the feeling of loneliness, it started surfacing in the middle of the previous century because humanity started becoming rounder, meaning we finished our egoistic linear development of thousands of years somewhere in the middle of the 20th century. Meaning we developed and developed, and as a result of our development, the world became more round, meaning it became integral, global, a small village where everyone's interdependent. It didn't happen all at once, but it gradually started happening between big societies, banks, in international trade. And we also see that the development itself supports it. Where did you see something like this 50 years ago? That people simply used to fly in a plane from place to place. If you had to do it because of work or something, otherwise you take a train or a car, sometimes even a cart. Today you fly and that's it. In 2 weeks I'm flying to South and North America, and 2 weeks later I'm coming back after I've been to 5 countries. So what are we talking about here? Is there room for loneliness? On the contrary, all of us are everywhere. Tourism is the #1 business in the world. And man is lonely. maybe subconsciously we think that we'll get as a result more impressions, we'll fill some inner deficiency, some doldrums, but it doesn't happen. As much as I know tourists, and I meet many tourists all over the world, I see that they're isolating themselves. You go to some country in order to isolate yourself. It's as if you're going to see the world, learn about the world, and sometimes you're even with a group of tourists, but you're alone, really alone, an even greater sense of loneliness than at home. And here we have to understand that this collision, this paradox, where the world on the one hand externally is becoming more interconnected and more lonely internally. And so are people too. We depend on each other in terms of work, business, culture. There are things that are worthwhile for us to do, but actually on the inside, we're in a state where it doesn't fill me. I personally don't need it. And I don't want it. Because the ego is growing inside the person individually, and the world around us is globally closing in. And then you have two completely different directions, where on the one hand the world is becoming one and interconnected, and on the other hand, people that don't want to be connected. On the contrary, their ego is growing personally, individually, and individualistically. And therefore we see these phenomena, we see how much a person doesn't want to accept this world, and how much the world, if this is something that we can identify, doesn't accept man. What do you mean? That we don't fit the framework that nature is giving us. A framework in which we should all be connected in a good, nice way. Meaning we see that the world is willing to provide us with everything. No problem. Food, clothes, medicine, accommodation, everything that we need. But we don't want to be connected like the world is. It wasn't this way in the past. In the past, everyone lived in one room, the entire family. Or a few families in one house, like my mother. Of course, the young couple lived at their parents' house. Today, everyone needs a room of their own, literally. And every child needs a room of their own, and so on. This is something that we see, and we also see it according to the technological development that supports it, because they go by the user. And they understand that today, the users, they're individual users. Everyone has to have their own mobile, their own email, their own everything. It was never this way before. And therefore, the ego that develops inside a person in this secrete manner forces us to think about what are we going to do. Because our will to receive demands to be fulfilled, and no one can fulfill himself. Like we're trying to do these days, but it doesn't work. We don't want to connect with one another. We can't, more correctly put, we can't connect with each other on the one hand. On the other hand, we somehow understand from research that unless we'll be interconnected, we'll remain empty, flawed, and we won't be able to enjoy life without a family, without kids, without friends, without something that's a bit more than simply going out to some pub or coffee shop, that there too I'm actually alone. So what follows is that, like you said, everyone feels the loneliness, but how to get out of it, no one knows. And here we have to build a new, strong, big educational system with professionals that understand the root of the problem and its solution. Otherwise, humanity will first of all see that people don't want to get married, don't want to have children, use drugs. Everyone's taking some kind of sedative, antidepressants. There are outbursts in the form of terror and so on. Because people don't see a satisfying future. Because one way or another, in the past, people were social. They lived in society. A person used to feel society. He was socially connected to many people. Today we've developed to a state where our ego doesn't want it. It became very individualistic. And because we have now the ability to build different gadgets, then we as if give a person everything that he needs in order for him to be alone in front of his screen. Mobile, television, computer, but that's how it is. And this is really also what people want. They're attracted to it. Yeah, but the problem is that after all of these ways of life, a person remains lonely, unsatisfied, feeling miserable that he has to fulfill himself, to add something to all of those games and gadgets that he's built for himself. That he nonetheless has to add something to it. The inner emptiness remains. And again, to run away on some journey or go someplace, but to come back and be alone again, something's missing, a sort of fulfillment that man cannot attain. And this is the problem. We've reached a special state in our development. What do we do next? Before we answer that, I want to understand there's a natural development of the ego, that the ego is becoming more and more individualistic. So, a person should have been content with being alone on his own, because that's the inner tendency. But still, people suffer. Where does the feeling of suffering as a result of the loneliness come from, even though that as if naturally this is where we're directed, to become ever more individualistic, and still we suffer as a result? No. The problem is that on part of the ego, we're developing towards greater individualism. That's the linear development. And according to our circular development that started in the 1950s, we're supposed to be closed inside an integral system. Which means what? That we have to be interconnected in a good and nice way. Not simply because we work at the same place or watch TV together or whatever, but that we have to fulfill our desire of being in a single system with everyone else. This desire is still unclear to us. So, what follows is that I'm developing in two different ways, in a linear way and a circular way. And I want both? I want both. I want for them to support each other, and for the two to be as one. And what follows is that I don't understand this form of development, that the entire world is becoming like a global village. I think that, yeah, scientists depend on each other, merchants, politicians, but what does it have to do with me? No, we see that all of nature is closing in this way, that if something happens on the one side of the world, it resonates on the other side, that we're all interconnected. And it's not in vain that there are different organizations that go against the emission of CO2 and so on, and also regarding the oceans, what we're doing, that it's all interconnected, and nature is showing us how integral it is. And human society is also discovering that this is how it is too, but it's still not demanding of a person to be connected to society. We didn't reach that yet, and this is something that we'll have to discover. So this is actually the human integration. Nature, eventually, is directed at bringing us closer to each other to a point where we'll have no choice. And in order for us to be able to truly internally be content with life, we'll have to find an inner formula for our connection. You talked about loneliness and emptiness. What's the difference between the two? Emptiness comes as a result of the loneliness. Simple. And this is something that we have to discover, because maybe I even feel that I'm lonely, and maybe I'd even give up being alone. I'd give up my isolation. But I don't know how to do it. I wasn't taught how to do it. Neither teachers, nor psychologists, nor psychiatrists, and the different people that I turn to. And I asked them, when I turn on different shows where they talk about nature, man, about a person's social problems, personal problems in the current modern world, I don't see, and actually all of these experts, this is how they are too. And they have no recommendations. They also don't have a clear attitude as to how to bring people closer, even though that they understand that this might be the solution. So how to bring closer people that are so individualistic, this is unclear. And here I can say that only the wisdom of Kabbalah can help us. The only thing that we need is the wisdom of Kabbalah. That explains how can we connect above our ego, where love covers for all crimes, that we remain isolated from each other. We don't touch each other, we don't bend anyone. But what we build here is a layer above our nature, a layer of connection, as if a roof. And under this roof, there is us, the individualists, and still, in order to exist in a good, right, correct way and build the correct kind of life, we all build a roof, and this roof is built on the second story. It doesn't cancel our individualism, it only helps us build the right kind of connection above us. And this allows us to exist on two different levels. Internally, I develop, and there I'm alone on my own, and no one can go there, on the one hand. And on the second story, on which we build our integral connection, there we build ourselves in the shape and the form of a circle. So what we have is internally, all of us are as a line, don't touch me, disregarding our inner personal state. And towards others, I'm open to be as one man and one heart with everyone. Meaning there is integration above the loneliness here, where both exist together, and therefore this is the new method, which is the method of connection that comes from the wisdom of Kabbalah. And this is what we have to teach humanity. Both of these systems exist internally simultaneously, or one is internal and the other external. Yeah, we can say that the external method is the circular method of connection, and the internal method, it speaks about a person per se. And it's not two methods, actually. It turns into one method, it becomes one method, that the more we connect, the more it helps us develop internally, individualistically. So a person's ego goes and grows all the time. And what happens to the circular layer? By becoming more and more egoistic, we build our connection on the upper level. What does a person feel in this state? He exists on his own. No one pushes their nose into his inner business, so to speak. But on the other hand, he knows that in order to feel the world, feel reality on a higher, broader level, above his loneliness, above his personality, he can feel it when he connects with others. And then he feels a world that is parallel to our world, a world that we build. When you started talking about the linear development, when we keep developing individualistically, is this a lonely place, or is it just a place that I feel that I'm a unit that exists in this world? Yeah, I personally exist and develop, and I feel that no one can get in there, and I feel myself more and more as an individual unit in the world, and it doesn't disturb anyone or myself, because we're all like individual nails. But above us, we build the layer of connection. What I'm trying to understand is, do I feel only my uniqueness, or I also feel lonely inside all of this? You don't feel loneliness because you express your loneliness in your connection with others. Meaning that the second layer that you're talking about is the layer of our connection, and the first layer is the layer in which I express myself as an individual in this world. And how do both of them coincide eventually? In parallel. They exist in parallel and support each other. And what does a person feel? Does a person feel lonely in this state? It's not loneliness, but it's that your personality becomes more evident. And do I feel miserable or lonely? No, not in a negative way. And is there positive loneliness in this state? A person feels that he is a creature per se, that he has his own qualities and traits. Why not? Yeah, but that's not loneliness. It's a state of uniqueness. We like it, actually. You don't feel miserable because, no, on the contrary, a person feels that this way he can better express, make his personality stand out more. What are then the two most important elements that could be as milestones? These are the two elements: personality, individualism, and the connection above it, which is called love covers for all crimes. Okay, how to develop our individualism, this we know how to do. Here we're talking about individualism that I use for the sake of the right kind of connection, that from nature we're built in a state where my entire individualism, if I use it in order to connect with others, in order to add to them, to supplement them, and they do the same towards me, then we become not just people that connect like cogwheels, but we become some kind of a complete and perfect system. And then, when we connect correctly inside this system, we start feeling the one operating this system, the upper force, nature. And this way, we start connecting and turning according to this force, meaning that we reach adhesion with it. Last question. We're a part of creation, a part of nature. Why did nature start developing this new emotion in us that I feel lonely, I feel sad, I feel miserable a few decades ago? How does this serve our evolution? I already said, we finished our linear development, linear evolution, and now we have to add our circular development, integral development, that we have to connect with all of our individualism and uniqueness. Now, how to correctly use this uniqueness in order to correctly connect and build the correct system. This is the picture. Yeah, this is actually the realization of the plan of creation. In the meantime, Dr. Lightman, our time's up, so thank you very much. Thank you, Yael. Thanks for being with us. Till next time, all the best.